Really good. And in the audience, welcome to Conversations for this 58-minute program with our guest, Alejandro R. And he's a composer, conductor, and a lecturer on classical music, and has actually written and is involved in opera. And he's originally from Venezuela. And Alejandro, welcome so very much to Conversation.
My pleasure to be here.
It's so good to talk with you. We're going to play some of your music and so forth. But I think, like I mentioned to you before we started the tape rolling, this is going to be the Alejandro Feo Hour. And could you share your own born and raised, a little bit of your family, your education, and then we'll talk about music and composing and so forth in broad general terms. But could you share your own background, please?
Yeah, sure. I was born in Caracas, Venezuela, 1970. And, well, by the time I traveled all the time with my father. He was involved in the opera business, had an opera company. And,
oh, really? In Caracas, right?
Yeah, and we did a lot of business with Canada and United States, and then after that, by the time I was 18, I knew, visiting New York City a few times as a child. By the time I was 18, I knew I was going to be a New Yorker. So by now, I've been in New York City for 20 years. And
oh, well, yeah, you're a New Yorker.
I feel at home.
In New York, I think New York's a wonderful town. Everybody in the world is here, it seems.
All cultures.
Yeah, it does.
Points of view.
If I may, it used to be there was 192 countries at the United Nations, sovereign nations, nation states, and it's gone up, I think, now. And there was a statistic one time that in the New York City metropolitan area, there were sizable communities of 189 of the 182 countries that everybody's here in this area.
Beautiful.
I think it's grand. It's cosmopolitan.
It helps creativity.
I think so. You think?
As a musician?
Yeah.
It helps your creativity, seeing so many different things and different angles of different topics, and get involved with so many different people. It helped my creativity. That's my experience.
Okay, that's an interesting perception in itself.
Yes.
The idea that variety can be a source of creative.
Yes.
Yeah, that's interesting to me. But you say your father was also involved in opera. He was in the cultural realm.
Yeah, in the 1940s, he spent a lot of time in the Pittsburgh Playhouse.
The what?
Pittsburgh Playhouse.
Oh, he
Playhouse.
was here in New York?
Yeah, in the 40s.
States.
He's at Michigan University, I think 1942, 43
at Ann
graduate.
Arbor?
Yeah, Ann Arbor.
My whole family, I'm from Michigan. My whole family was Ann Arbor.
Love that town. So.
My daddy was in the law class of 26. He had Leopold and Loeb were both in his class, I believe. You may not be familiar, but Clarence Darrow. And my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, was the first woman ever to graduate from the University of Michigan Medical College in 1888, when no women were supposed to be doctors.
That's incredible.
Yeah, they said she broke the glass ceiling. But Ann Arbor's, so he was at Ann Arbor.
Yes. And theater man, playwright, also got involved in politics and human rights. So it's, that combination was really interesting.
Yeah.
Bottom line, I'm born 1970, and he got a libretto now.
The libretto for your Socrates.
He did
We're going to
libretto.
talk about that.
Yes.
Yeah, and play a little music from it.
Yeah.
He did the libretto. I don't mean to. He's still living in
94.
94 years old. God
still up
bless
and running
you.
and writing plays.
You got good genes, man. You got
that's what I heard.
You got a long trail winding up.
That's what I hear all the time.
Yeah, right. That's good. Was it a large family? And
not really. I would say medium-sized family.
And did the whole family move to the United States?
No, I was actually the one doing it and taking the risk, and I'm really happy.
But you learned a great deal at your father's knee, as it were, then being in the business.
Totally. By the time I was 10 years old, I was looking at contracts and how the opera world works and music world in general. So I got a, first row, so to speak, training with him since I was. Now, musically speaking, I started when I was 5.
That's what I said. Yes. I saw in your bio, I'd read that you were music. The business is one thing.
Yes.
Do you think those who are involved in the creative process often have a difficult time dealing with the business realities of the world?
Generally speaking, that's a great question. Generally speaking, I would say yes. Most artists rather have stay away from it. I do it. I try to do it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I can't avoid that. I did grow up with that business background.
And your father had that ability.
Totally. He was an impresario.
He was an impresario.
Yeah.
That's a huge term.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So having that background, yes, I do try to stay away when I do my composing.
Yeah.
I try to keep my artistic side completely well protected and covered.
That's interesting.
But I do have the knowledge to spot when a deal, musically speaking, could go wrong or not, right on the spot.
And
I grew up like that.
You can, maybe perhaps with a good abogado or something, but you're able to read a contract and not get the wool pulled over your eyes. If you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, I don't mean to brag, but I'm pretty good at it.
Okay.
I can look at 15 pages lawyer's contract and
make sense.
A couple of 3-4 pages glance, I will figure out
And
things.
if there's something glaring, you can pick it out, like say,
I actually through my career, yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, through my career, I help a lot of other artists.
I think a lot of artists have had the wool pulled over their eyes by fast-moving, quick change artists in that realm of business and take advantage of artists over the longer term, perhaps, because artists are more innocent souls in terms of the hard realities of the business world, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, in a way. That's why I found very, it would fill my soul with joy when I could help other artists.
Okay, that's really good.
In situations, involving contracts or because I had that background and that experience and singers or you name it. I actually grew up with all kinds of music. I mean, I grew up listening to AC/DC and Keys and Phil Collins and jazz and the American Songbook and country music. It just operates my background. So having that solid base, what I do these days is get involved in anything. And one of the things I do get involved is film scoring.
That's really important.
In the music field, I think film scoring is probably the closest thing to writing an opera or a musical, for that matter. You're describing story.
Yeah, that's right. That's right, and it's very important. We were talking about a man named Williams. Was it John Williams?
Yeah, one of the pioneers, John Williams.
He was one who had a lot of film scoring.
Yes.
And the music of a film, let's say a feature film or anything, is really important, isn't it? Perhaps more than we realize, because it touches emotional currents and everything.
Yeah, it's a matter of having your. I mean, I'm a probably modern composer because I'm young and I'm part of this latest generation, whatever. But my soul, my heart, I find that I talk about a chain of command when it comes to composing.
Okay, chain of command. Spell it out,
the
please.
composer is not really in charge. This is my point of view.
Okay, please.
Music is in charge. What is music? Well, you can read books about music, but music, you cannot touch it, you cannot smell it, you cannot see it, but it gives you goosebumps.
It gives you goosebumps, yeah.
That's the most amazing thing in the world.
Right.
I listen to my music inside. Anything I compose comes out of my soul.
Or anything you listen to, does it touch the same
way.
part?
I look at it the same way. Then I put it on paper, and I have all kind. Each composer has a technique that he follows. But I would say most of my music, if you want to put it, fill in the blank answer, I write very romantically.
Romantically, as opposed to what would be the counterpart?
Well, I use modern. Techniques, sounds, but on certain spots of my composition, in this case Socrates, the opera, to enhance the drama. I don't spend 2 hours and 5 minutes writing modern music.
Wait a minute, is that because it's a historical setting of the opera, or what do you mean modern music?
Modern music...
Excuse my ignorance.
No, modern music meaning, as simple as I can put it, is... dissonances. Atonal, things like that. I do use it, but to enhance certain spots on this Socrates drama. I don't spend the whole 2 hours and 5 minutes writing modern all the time. Mostly, I describe with music happiness, sadness, the trial scene on the opera that is very intense. It's a trial. I just go with my guts. And
I've heard people say, I got a friend, Bob Ashford, who he's a lawyer, but he does classical music, and he thinks that there has to be a recapturing a melody. That melody in the modern thing is being somehow just lost or something. What do you think in that melody?
Well, that's a topic for another show. And to tell you the truth, I'm not afraid of melodies.
You're not afraid. Well, it would be good to have them brought in. Is what.
Well, there is a culture in college, talking colleges around the world these days. If you write a melody, a lot of teachers. Let me just put it. I mean, I'm going to be straightforward.
Yeah,
I was some
straightforward.
I was some sort of antichrist in college.
You were an antichrist.
Yeah, I would just. Well, yeah, I put it that way. I wouldn't agree with most things I would see in college. For example, if I remember the time I wrote a melody, and I teach compositions.
You do,
days,
okay.
And I know there are ways to tell a young composer how to improve things without making him change the melody that comes out of his soul.
Okay.
I remember the time I wrote a melody in college, and for that matter, a few times, many times, when I wrote melodies in college. There is this new modern thing, and I'm sure most modern composers listen to me right now, disagree, but this is my opinion.
Okay.
If you write a melody, you are imitating Puccini, Verdi, or that composer.
Yeah, right. Classic.
I'm not looking to be perfect I'm not looking to critics to like my writing on the score.
Yeah.
I'm not looking to be romantic or not. Whatever's coming out of my soul, I'm going to express it.
Right.
And in this libretto, describing this Socrates story, if I need to be writing melodies, I will write melodies. They're my melodies.
Will the libretto inform the music, or will the music inform the libretto? I mean, how does that work out? You say your dad works on Socrates' libretto.
It's got to be
mutual.
But
there's two different, or in popular, you've got lyricists and composers. There's a difference. Is it the same in opera?
They got to melt. The music, the composer and the librettist definitely got to melt.
When we hear a Verdi thing or Puccini, or when you hear, has that been Mozart? When is that hold that the libretto is separate from the music, or how does that dialectic work in terms of the musical composition?
Well,
if you understand what I'm saying.
Yes. Like I said before, it depends on the composer. Each composer finds his technique, her technique to work things out the best.
The best in terms of what the libretto...
Describing the story.
Yeah, so
that's on those lyrics.
But it's taking cues from the story. So if you've got somebody who's just had a beautiful life-enhancing experience, you want swelling music that's very positive, very optimistic. If there's just been a death in the family and the dog died or something, you want something that's not of that nature. So the material, or the storytelling, let's say that, it does inform the music.
Yes.
Okay. Could it ever be that the music, a libretto, would follow the creation of music, that it comes swelling out of the soul of a composer?
Those
and
are
then they would write it.
You're doing beautiful, because that's the way it works.
Okay.
You go in libretto, music, libretto. It's like a crossfire.
Yeah, right.
It should be a crossfire, artistically speaking.
Yeah, yeah.
So you're right on the money.
Yeah, you could work together on that. Another thing I'm wondering about music, you have, we got different things. If you're talking about composing, that's one thing. The other thing is performance. So we have a Caruso, we have a, Pavarotti in singers, or Joan Sutherland, and people who are talented and so forth, or musicians who can play an instrument very well.
Right.
That's all part of it. But then you also have the context in which the piece is written, and I'm wondering about that. Mozart seemed to have been, from the time he was a boy, imbued genetically with a certain kind of capability. He was he could get totally on with tone and that. And what do you think in terms of the overall input to it? Let's just go out on a limb and say to the geniuses that have existed in terms of that. Is it nurture? Is it nature? Is it genetic? Is it, how do we account for the genius representations musically, whether it's the composition or the performance? And do you understand what I'm saying?
Both.
It apply to all fields, statecraft and other things, but particularly in the case of the arts.
Well, I would answer that in two parts. I think the first part would be, it comes with you when you're born. And
genetic.
Genetic.
Oh,
okay.
Okay.
And the second one is, any composer able to listen to himself,
Yeah.
what those musical ideas that come
Yeah.
out of his or her soul, he will be accomplishing an extraordinary mission. That mission is describe with sounds what you feel or what you're reading. In this case, it's an opera. It's Socrates. So I try to focus on the drama, but I am listening to myself.
You're listening to
my soul. The best thing any composer is ever going to write.
Or artist. Or
artist or performer.
Is it a portrait of a painter?
A painter.
Picasso.
Anything.
You know,
Comes, you can hardly explain it. Any painter or composer or singer or piano performer can tell you a lot of things during a lecture about their art.
Yeah.
Yes, they can.
Yeah.
But there are certain moments, myself as a composer, when I do my conferences and lectures, sometimes certain specific spot that somebody's just making a comment about it, about my music, I can hardly or not explain it at all, because the moment of inspiration was so big, so undescribable, so unhuman, that all I can tell that person is, it just came out of me.
Yeah, transcendental.
The way some singers are interviewed and they go, I don't know, I just open my mouth.
Yeah, right.
Some singers tell you that, and then I identify myself a lot as a composer. That's what I did with Socrates. Socrates is when either I play at the piano.
You do play?
Yeah,
you play well?
Yeah, as a composer.
Are you good? What instruments are you really good on?
I'm just a pianist as a composer.
Let me just say, are there any instruments that you're particularly good on as opposed to another instrument that you're pretty good on, but not as good as others? And how does that thing work out in terms of the performance capability of a particular artist?
Well, because...
Does it translate? And will it translate between one muse for painting and one other for music? Will it translate in that a person who's artistic might very well be able to appreciate and maybe even create within another medium that they're most known for, if you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
Is that translatable between the arts? Yeah.
It is.
Okay.
And again, back to inspiration.
Yes.
As long as inspiration is there, maybe you play one instrument and you are really good at another instrument, but your inspiration might make you tapping into that soul, might make you play other instruments that you're never been really familiar with in an amazing way.
You think a poet will, a poet is with words, and that's interesting. Shakespeare was pretty good with the English language, wasn't he? You know, I mean, to put it mildly, James Joyce for that matter, or poetry or art, painting, or music, that there's a camaraderie between the people that are of the creative artistic community?
Well, I'm glad you made...
A special place for that. Do you think it's inherent? Do you think there's more creativity latent, as it were, within the human society than the nurturing of that has been able to bring out of them, because they're so happen to be so involved? Let's say if somebody's starving to death and their kids are starving, it's a little hard to be really able to tap into the creativeness that may be inherent in their genetic makeup, but the conditions, the social, political,
That's
economic
a fantastic
conditions.
question, and I'll tell you why. Because towards the end of your phrase, you use the word tapping into this. Well, if you're starving, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Well,
that's called nurturing. Or suppose you have I asked you about your family background. I had the best mother in the history of the universe, and all that early nurturing and everything really influences. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
So it's a combination of a latency. You said creative. It could be creative in some other field, like something scholarship or science. They're all the sciences and things.
And to answer your question,
it's a larger issue than just the arts. Yeah.
Yes. Any situation you're in, what I do, well, let's use your example, starvation. I mean, if you're starving, and artists go through that, okay? Well,
very often in a garret somewhere in Paris, right? With a little
we gotta
candle.
focus that. Yes, we gotta focus that.
Yeah.
And put it in a track, an internal spiritual track, that if you compose, turn that frustration, that starvation into music.
Yeah, that's true.
It's not easy.
Very often
because you're starving. if that's the case.
Right.
But anything you feel too sad, you feel extremely happy, you're completely in love.
Yeah, right.
That needs to be translated into music.
Right.
That's what I do, and that's what I did with Socrates.
No, I understand. That's a lot of the artist people. And so, did you ever see the modern movie Moulin Rouge by any chance?
No, I didn't see that.
It's great. The thing I think is really good. But I had a guy one time say that you're pulled back. It's like an arrow. You're pulled back in despair or something. And then there's a release, and sometimes they get billed with being manic depressive or something, but they're pulled back emotionally, and it's just searing the soul. She left, or whatever it is, or something, and then it's and then boom, then there's a creativity that is.
And I like the way
it's sort of up and down. You know?
See the well,
or do you think that's the case? The real artist might suffer more than the normal. Mundane person who's living a normal bourgeois life. You know?
I'll say yes.
Yes, okay.
And I'll say yes, very secure, very sure. Yes, that's the answer. And I like the way you've been talking. You've been doing and spoken crescendo. Crescendo is a musical term, but what you've been doing is a spoken crescendo, because you took me to a place where that's where I wanted people. That's why I wanted people to feel with Socrates. I want them to go the same way I want to feel it. When I go to the theater, I want to sit down, and a moment of sadness is extreme, painful sadness.
Right.
Happiness throughout the opera is completely happiness.
Yeah, right. Kick out the
I
jams.
want them to be scared. I want them to get tied up to that chair, like in a movie theater.
That could be in a rock and roll, or that could be. They say kick out the jams.
That's another fantastic point.
That's high points. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, and sometimes it's spontaneous. You can't even predict it. Yeah. Right. But
you can't even predict it.
Yeah.
And you just brought in another point.
Yeah.
These operas, Socrates, was designed for all audiences. You like rock and roll? You're going to like this. Not because it's mine. It's just because it's not your typical opera musical drama.
Okay.
The way the music, the phrasing is done with the orchestra, with the voices, the sounds, it is designed for all kinds of audiences. And I've had all kinds of people. I had people from the jazz world, rappers, listening to it and enjoy it.
Yeah.
Because it needs to be a message.
Yeah,
the message of this opera is really important.
Yeah.
It needs to get to everybody.
Okay, we're going to get to it, and we're going to play a piece of it, and we're going to listen to it very carefully. It's an audio piece we're going to do. A couple more things. I have a friend, that same fellow, Bob Ashford, who does composing and that sort of thing, and this idea of that you're bringing up is really important. But I wonder if we go back, let's say the scene of let's go back when, and I don't want to go into great detail, but the ability to put it down, the notational system, is it Baroque? When did it come? And I've talked to you on the telephone. Would we be able to have the music or know the music that was done? I had my friend Ornette Coleman. I don't know if you're familiar. He's a very, very leading avant-garde jazz artist. He got the Pulitzer Prize last year. I was really proud of him. He got that. But he said of Bob's music that it was really important. The point I wanted to make. But when did we get it to where, like Augustus Caesar at the time of Christ, there were lyres. We know, musical instruments, but we didn't have a notational system by which we could put the music down to where you can play it and know what it sounded like. When did we first get that we had that sort of thing, so that the music itself could be conveyed in the means by which we had of conveying? We had no recording devices or anything of that. When did that become, but when you got notational system, I don't know, it was Bach or whenever that came in, that gives us a tap into the ancient sounds that, say, would have soothed the brow of Augustus Caesar in ancient Rome or before even. Right
before Christ.
Before Christ?
Those very first symbols, that they were drawings. They were
like
like figures,
ideograms, like Mesopotamia,
and humanity keeps just very few of those, and they were specific enough to create some specific sounds and rhythms right before Christ. So
images of that. See, it's an image. That's like the phonetic alphabet.
And then right after Christ, right after that, that started to develop into rapidly.
But we didn't have a notational system with the bars where you have the B flat and the this and the that and everything until Renaissance or something.
Yeah.
It was more or less recent that we've had any way of...
And then we started having all the Gregorian scales.
So what is that, 14th, 15th century or something?
Well, even before.
Before there was.
Even before. Like I said, it was, I mean, not rapidly developed.
Yeah,
but,
right.
But it is amazing. That always was really interesting to me, how music, even before that, wasn't what we have today as notation, but it was very well developed in a way that musicians were able to read and perform.
Do you want to hear something really interesting I heard the other day, because they got these new musical instruments, and that Beethoven, who was a very great composer and so forth, wrote music, and it was for, this is an interesting thing about technology, and we're going to get to the, to Socrates and everything, but he wrote a piece, and the musical and the instrument that was available to him to compose it was available, and then there developed, it was an early piano, or it was a relatively early piano, then there developed a better and more sophisticated piano that made it possible for nuances of what he had written to be able to be heard that couldn't be heard on the earlier piano. Do you understand what I mean?
Amazing.
Isn't that something? That there's a technology that develops and it came out. The beauty and the nuance, which could not be heard on the original source of the instrument you have. I mean, you're only limited by what the instrument can do also.
Yeah,
right?
all those great, all those great masters Bach had ideas on that you can see these days on his music, on his score, that they were ahead of their time.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking about the technological ability. You get a Kurzweil piano now. It's an instrument that you can play. It just sounds like a Steinway Grand, which is
what we had today is completely amazing.
They got pianists that can't tell the difference when you play it on
one of the best examples is 1979, when Coppola put together the best, to me still today, the best soundtrack ever, not necessarily in terms of the original music. Coppola in 1979.
Who?
Francis Ford Coppola.
Oh, for which movie?
Apocalypse Now. The 79 Apocalypse Now.
Yeah, tell me.
That's the first time well, first of all, that's a grandfather 5.1 surround sound we have these days.
Yeah, that's right. I hadn't thought of that. It's the playing. Yeah, that's right.
But
that's another thing.
all the modern technology we musicians, composers have these days in our fingertips, it comes out of that. That's the first ever film score reduction, synthesizer reduction of coming from an orchestral original score. And they had the big machines, and what we had today is just smaller size equipment with a technology that is 1,000 times more sophisticated than that.
It is amazing. So, that's a larger metaphor for the whole human environment.
Even with that, I still think that there is nothing as solid and as beautiful as listening to your soul, getting a pen and a pencil, and writing it down.
And having a notational...
If your computer goes down, if your memory goes down, you still can deliver your job. It's on paper.
It's on paper with a notational system with bars, and you can do that.
It's not the way it happens these days. Most composers rely, in my personal opinion, too much on music done by software. I use it. I need to use it, and I totally, I support that. But I come from a generation that we learn to hear, write, and keep that.
Doesn't it get in the way? Wouldn't it be better to be able to just be recording it spontaneously? Why do they still have court...
Well, you can do that and then track it back.
Why do they still have court reporters typing things out in the court system rather than recording things multimedia so that you get all the nuance? Yeah, it's like a tie to the heart. One last thing that we want to get to Socrates, if you don't mind.
Yes.
We want to play a piece of that. But one thing is like, suppose somebody like Mozart. Mozart was just something else, you know, and everything.
Totally.
But he could create an opera, and to put on an opera in his day for the royal heads and so forth, you had authority figures for the political system that would have a certain interest. Let's say an emperor of the emperor of an empire or something like that. And they are the people who had the ability to commission it. They had to commission it because it was a big show, it was a big effort and everything. So if you write something that is going to, in a certain sense, please the emperor or the power elements du jour, if you know what I mean, is that a problem that you have to write some, or is it become a problem in the modern experience that you have to have something that's going to please the public taste rather than something that is of its own creative? Picasso did Cubism. He was presaging modern physics with Cubism. So, and you're saying, or the classic example in painting was Vincent van Gogh painting all those irises down in Arles.
Right.
And the people in the academy said, well, why aren't you painting like the old time and that? Or anything that is retro in a way, like an empire or something. Then you have to please the people that are putting on and putting up the money is a metaphor, but also money for launching the thing. And if you can't please them, you can't put on anything. And is that a problem in terms of what is able to be staged, what is able to be presented, particularly drawing upon some of your understanding of the business realities of opera or any other creative effort? And what do you think about that dynamic in terms of the modern world? It seems to me the arts are given short shrift in terms of other political considerations by our leadership elements du jour throughout history. And how does it relate with the creative community that is coming up with something new? Particularly creative means new in a certain sense. Do you understand what I mean?
Yes.
What do you think of all that dynamic?
Well, it's a beautiful question. In a way, you had two things going on. You have the audience, general public, and then we talk about kings and how to please certain...
Who had the money to put it up?
You got to please yourself first. That's my opinion as a composer.
Well, you could starve.
I know.
Van Gogh did.
And then the other question is, are you willing to take the risk? I was, and I did. And I still... I'm willing to take any risks.
Creatively,
anything.
But wouldn't you shave it a little bit if it meant you could get the contract and get the opera house under contract?
Sure. You always got to be open-minded.
You got to take that piece out because it says that I'm a schmuck. Yeah. I'm the leader, I'm a schmuck. You got to take that out, and then I'll finance. Do you understand what I'm saying?
You got to be open-minded.
Do you understand?
Yes, you got to be open-minded.
You understand what I'm saying? The practicalities of the business world.
But you know, I have a solution that would break through everything.
Wonderful. I'd love to see the creative spirit just soar.
Again, back.
Yeah.
100% of the times, that's been my experience, that you listen to your soul again. Audiences are going to love it, and kings or anybody with power to tell you, I will produce or not, will think twice.
Okay, well, that's nice. Van Gogh painted...
music can go through a lot of things.
Yeah, but it can be a little bit hard. Galileo said we weren't the center.
It's not paradise.
Do you understand that Galileo said that we were not the center of the universe, and the Catholic Church had terror? They only let him off the hook about 12 years ago for saying we're not the center of the universe because all of the institutions were tied up.
It comes with a prize. It comes with a prize, especially composers.
Yeah, like Van Gogh suffered.
Performers,
life.
Yes. But you got to be, some composers are not willing to go through that. Other composers are.
He painted those irises when he should have been painting still lifes or something, or whatever the critics du jour of the day, and particularly those who influence the people with the power, which generally is money. Yeah. And so money rules now, don't you think? Everything is done.
That's why I wrote an opera about Socrates, because he has to do exactly with this.
Now we can get to Socrates. Let's get to that, because we want to play. We've got about a 7-minute piece we're going to play and sort of listen to, you and us and the audience, for that matter, and everything. So talk to me about it. You've been influenced particularly in your own personal, ideas and way of living and all that by 4 people in particular. It seems to me it comes out in your bio. Maybe you could say the context by which you came up with writing the opera Socrates, which I think I'm quick to say is the libretto was done by your dad.
Yes.
That's a family affair. That's really good. But share a little bit the creation or the coming to the creation of the opera Socrates And where does it stand? Has it been launched? Will it be launched? What, you know,
Okay.
Fill us in.
Beautiful. Yes. Basically, Socrates is about an everyday life. From the moment we go to a bank and we cannot get a loan, to the moment your kids go to school and some issues come out of school with teachers, or what, you name anything that can happen in our daily lives has to do with judgment. How we human beings still, before Jesus Christ times, judge too much in each other.
Judge each other too much.
Judge each other too much.
Throw
and
too
I'm
many
fascinated by
you know,
men like Socrates before Christ. I always talk about this.
Yeah.
How about these different times? Socrates before Christ, then we had Jesus Christ, then you name it. Dr. King in the 60s, back to Gandhi.
Gandhi, yeah.
Then ahead to John Lennon. Every time we had a good person walking around trying to say it like it is, we killed them.
Don't they? Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
That was my inspiration. I'm not naive.
You're not naive.
I know we're not gonna fix the world with music, but music,
it might help.
Music, properly can contribute. People from all kinds in the music field, all kinds of music can come together with music.
Okay.
I was inspired by this idea. I am planning to have Socrates in all major theaters around the world on repertoire. On repertoire meaning at least once a year.
Yeah.
Right on the most important theaters in the world. Can be done? Yes, can be done. It's right now on that track. I don't need to touch it much. I just got to let it roll a little bit. That's where the opera is, and that's what inspired me.
So what inspired you was the call for justice, and those people that you mentioned were all people, it seems to me, who were in favor generally, because we talk about haves and have-nots, the power, the people, that kind of thing, were inspired by, who people were inspiring us to, and inspire themselves, to be concerned with what is called generally the least among us, the poor. Take care of the poor. And all of our wisdom schools, Lao Tzu, you could go to China, you could go to Confucian, they all said, take care of the least among us. But you'll notice in the political realm, it's never applied. People, by and large, particularly bourgeois or people, what they want to do is be one of those who have, as opposed to being caring about what the have-nots situation
That's a great point.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
And
that's the one that operates today. You'll notice all the assets are going to a few people who own everything, and they have all the power and so forth, as always has been.
But some people, I want to send a message with this opera straight to cultural corruption and corrupt politicians around the world. There are so many unfair, unhuman, human rights situations that we are not taking care of properly. The people in power, and that's the history of humanity. Am I going to say, I'm not saying I'm being so naive, I'm saying I'm going to change that with an opera? No. But
you're going to help
with a powerful work of music. And a lot of people from all sources getting involved in a project like this, we can send an incredibly strong message.
Okay, and and the music is part of that. I want to just say one quote that I do all the time. People get sick of me hearing it, but it's James Joyce having Daedalus say, history is a nightmare, you could add, of injustice. History has always been unjust.
Yes.
You had certain people living in the king and the castle and all that, from which we're attempting to awaken. Do you think we may be at a time of qualitative transformation where universal justice can actually rain down, like Mr. King said is coming, the promised land, that kind of thing? We may be living at a time of universal justice that history was never able to allow because it has some technology, some connection to the technological extension and capability.
Yes. To answer your question,
so we live at a time.
I think we're right there.
Okay, well that's important.
Right on it.
We need messages.
That's where we are.
Now, what we got to do is stop all this talk. All right, because we're going to play. We have a piece of music, and maybe you could set it up. It's part of. As I understand, It's a 7-minute piece of music that we want to play. Maybe you could, in a certain sense, as they say in the business, set it up for us. What is it? What are we hearing? And then we're just going to sit here and listen to it, and the audience can too. But it's your composition. Set it up for us, and then we'll play it.
Well, very long story, very short.
I'm sure.
This is after the trial of Socrates. The opera is before the trial. The opera starts before the trial with the invasion of Athens by the Spartans.
Yeah, right. Okay.
The amnesty, all the way to the trial.
Okay.
This is after the trial. This is when Socrates' wife, Xanthippe, goes to see Socrates in jail. And they talk about their children. This is an extremely, I spent 2 weeks traumatized, realizing this wife talking to a man, telling him, his husband, you have the opportunity to escape right now. Just go to another country. And him telling, Socrates telling Xanthippe, I will not, if that's my faith, there is something else after life. I'm going to die.
Oh, yeah, right.
Talking about their children. It's extremely dramatic duet.
And the need to comply to the law.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. That kind of
they didn't apply the law to him, but he was applying the law to him.
Understand,
and that's another topic. But it's a very dramatic duet. We're going to listen to the piano vocal score.
Okay.
This is the very first original version of this aria by Socrates' wife, telling him, it's called I Won't Go Anyway. I will stay here in Athens with our children.
And bring on the hemlock.
And this is, exactly, this is her talking to him. It's a piano vocal. I did a second version. Modernly, I've been touching, lately I've been touching the opera. I've been enhancing it. I've been making it so dramatic and so intense.
Okay, so
But this is the first version.
And this is the first version. You got another that's been, so it may have been altered a little bit, but we're talking to Alejandro R, and he's the composer of this, and we're going to play that, and we're just going to listen.
Sure. Almost.
Now,
And it's a love story.
Yeah. Okay, come on back. That's the end, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, Josh. Oh, they want to let the applause in. Okay, I hope we're back, and I hope we're being that's beautiful.
It's a love story too.
Yeah, love story.
I turned this opera into not only the Socrates topic, but it is a love story as well.
Now, who was singing? I mean, this is something, because we had Joan Sutherland, I don't know, some people, Maria Callas, we've had great voices, we've had Pavarotti.
This is a young student, ended up going to the, I remember correctly, Chicago Lyric Opera, young, program for young singers. So by the time I was a young student, did a wonderful job, I think.
What a wonderful job. What about that? I mean, there are people who would do, like Caruso. I was raised on Caruso. I mean, that kind of thing. And there was something, you know what I mean? The star quality in terms of the singing. So you could write a piece, and if the person can't really get up to high C or whatever it takes in order to get that, you know what I mean, that emotional
That's a great
surge.
point, because these operas...
Because it's a collaborative thing between the writer. You can write something and say, sing 10,000 feet high in terms of a note, but they can't reach that.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
And it was written, that's a great question, because it was written to be pretty much any good singer can do it. Any good soprano, any good... Sanctipa, Socrates' wife, is a soprano. Could be any good soprano. I wrote it specifically that way.
You can
Socrates
write it that way,
is a bass baritone. A good bass or good baritone could do it. And Anytus, he used to be Socrates' best friend. His son ended up dying in a street fight in Athens. Always blame Socrates for that. Ends up being, during the trial, Socrates' main persecutor is a spinto tenor. That's kind of a voice that is specified a little bit with the term spinto. But most of the opera is written in a way that's easier for singers, but it's also beautiful and dramatic. And the comprimario roles, most operas, comprimario roles are roles comprimarios.
What does
that mean? With the main singers in Italian, comprimario. It means with the main singer, like accompany them, are very important. Have
the chorus.
The chorus is important as well. It's a form of comprimario in a way. But the actual comprimario, female or male voices, different from most operas, have a very I wrote in a very particular way that make them really important, vocally speaking.
Okay, and that has to be all choreographed. I mean, in terms of
the production,
the musical production.
It's a very simple production, very powerful production. Lighting is very important, because towards the end, when he's drinking the hemlock, the costume was to walk around and then sit down so the poison go through your blood. Everything starts getting dark. And just one light stays on Socrates' head, and he pronounces last words, men of Athens, and he dies. And after that, I just go crazy with the orchestra. And I make the orchestra play an incredibly dramatic final part, like the overture, because the beginning of the opera, the overture from the beginning is telling you, the dramatic music is telling you something bad's going to happen. So going to Socrates is going like to see your favorite movie, in a way.
Okay. There's so many questions that come up and everything. One of which you just came up with, You said you write the thing so that any decent soprano could sing. Now, what about if you're talking about that you're writing something that only a very, very gifted, special, gifted person can do, rather than that anybody can do, to where
it's also written for that. That's a great question.
Because it's an interpretation on their part, so that
exactly.
if singer A sings, it'll be okay, it'll be good, it'll be stirring. But if singer B sings it, it'll knock the socks off.
It is their
choice. You
choice.
understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely, and the answer is yes.
How does a composer deal with that gradation of possibility within the piece as it's written?
You leave it to them. The greatest soprano is going to do the greatest performance, or the average soprano or tenor or bass baritone is going to do an average performance. How do I deal with that? I'm careful with all the ranges and what is called the tessitura. Tessitura is not the range from this note to that note, the lowest to the highest note the singer can do. Tessitura is that part of that range where that singer is more comfortable with.
And
so I really play easy with that, so everybody can.
Yeah, and is that a standard thing that everybody does, so that you could write to where it could be sung by a Pavarotti or me in the shower? You can sing the same song. I can sing Traviata.
Well, I meant to say
you know what
that
I'm saying. You know?
For example,
do you understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Okay.
What I meant exactly by that was that a good leggera soprano. Leggera is a very light kind of soprano. Or a good dramatic soprano could do it. Different kinds of soprano, different kinds of tenors. But tenors, I'm a little specific. I talk about spinto tenor here. Spinto tenor is a specific kind of tenor.
That's it. I don't know the detail. Yeah,
and then bass baritone, well, yeah, I'd rather have a bass baritone, but a good bass could do it, a good baritone could do it. In terms of that, that's what I'm talking about, that I make it the same way is for everybody, in terms of you don't need to like opera to like Socrates. Not because it's done by me.
No.
It's just because the idea, the message is so strong about our daily life. This is a modern story. Before Christ, it is a modern story. What happened to you when you go to college and you say like it is? What happened to you when you go to a show like this and say like it is? And that's why I wanted that message to be real available for everybody. This is not for the opera dinosaurs. This is not... And we have very few left, actually.
Of the opera what?
Dinosaurs.
Dinosaurs. Oh, dinosaurs.
This is music that will get to everybody, and it does.
It would get to everybody in the mass and that? Or
Yes.
Is it going to knock hip-hop off the chart?
And on top of that, I'm working on a Broadway musical version of it.
A Broadway music. Okay, that's getting there, but will it knock hip-hop off the hip? We used to have a thing called Hit Parade.
Well, put it this way.
I will. Song. You understand?
Yes. We'll have a lot of people from other fields in music going to Socrates, that's for sure.
Okay, that's really good. Congratulate. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful music. And the questions that come up are amazing. We didn't hardly get to be able to how important it is to multimedia fare, the musical component of that. And that's becoming more and more important as multimedia and film becomes a means of tapping into the store of human knowledge that has not been available to us until just yesterday. One of the technological aspects of the modern experience that may make it possible for us all to wake up from the nightmare of injustice that is history. Do you agree with that?
Totally. Totally agree.
And are you optimistic for the human prospect, or do you sometimes wax pessimistic because we have a capability of destroying our whole species with the weapons now?
Well,
do you realize that?
I'm not optimistic if that's going to be thinking that it will be accomplished by humans. No.
That would not be an optimistic projection that you would want to
Technology
encourage.
goes up.
Let's destroy the whole species.
And keeps going up. The human spirit keeps going down. The first person we should have listened to was Socrates. If you are not honest with yourself, you cannot be honest with anything nor anybody else.
He was one of the greats.
We didn't listen to him. We didn't listen to Jesus. We didn't listen to Gandhi. We didn't listen to Dr. King and the Sister and many, many other people.
Right. Well, then that is a sort that humanity doesn't seem to be able to listen to the creative and the what would we call the spiritual or the the living elements of society and justice, that they don't listen to that, and it's not in the saddle now. It is still only, everything is becoming very concentrated in the hands, power the power du jour and so forth. So there's great reason to be concerned. But in any case, let's hope that your work,
Thank you, sir.
which is very good and which I congratulate
Appreciate
you
it.
on,
Thank
can
you.
help move us in the right direction, which might
Yes.
be even a liberating kind of capability
Yes.
that is characteristic of the time which you and I were privileged to be born into and the Chinese warned against.
What we
because it's
humans
very
need is
dangerous.
therapy, and music is therapy.
Music is therapy. Your pleasure at the perception. Alejandro R. composer and lecturer and extraordinaire, if I may. Thanks a lot for coming
you,
in.
sir.
So
My
good to see
pleasure.
Alejandro.
My pleasure.
All the very best. And please
you.
tune in. We'll be coming back again tomorrow. So please, and once again, Alejandro, thank you very
Thank
much.
you,
This is
sir.
the beginning of
My
a
pleasure.
beautiful friendship. We got to stay in touch.
Totally.
Okay. Thank
Totally.
you very much for viewing. We'll be coming back again tomorrow. So.